Hey, everybody. We're going to be waiting for a little while here as people start to join in. I see that numbers are going up. Welcome to CPG Outlook for 2025. I'm just going to chit chat and try to keep you entertained until the number of participants goes up a little bit more. Very excited to have Sherry here. We realized at the beginning that the two of us have a very right-minded way of organizing our literature and how we both have a penchant for the red books, which, Sherry?
I have heard our personal self-help book, someone told me, and I'm like, yep, I agree. That is what is on my shelves.
Yeah, that's just the way to roll. I was saying that Simon Sinek is in heavy rotation at my place, and his spines are red. So I feel like we're just leaning into the infinite game, all of those communication capabilities, right?
I loved everything he's done, but I loved The Infinite Game. I felt like it
Uh,
was the book where I thought, this is what I've been trying to like put my brain around how businesses run. Like it was so well done.
yeah. And if honestly, Simon Sinek is the way he writes. He actually, I listened to him on a podcast recently, and he admits he has ADHD. And so the way he writes his book is for people who have short attention spans, either because they too have ADHD, or whether it's just because they have multiple children and they're trying to cook dinner and do all the juggles. So anyway, huge fan of Simon Sinek. Go for it. Oh, I see. Yeah, read the Infinite Game, Start with Why many times. There's actually a Start with Why workbook as well, which is fantastic.
Interesting.
Yeah. We'll keep chatting about our favorite books for the next couple of minutes as we get everybody on. Another one that we touched on was Malcolm Gladwell. And he also, I feel, writes in little short vignettes. Really interesting stuff. The tipping point, the outliers, really
Yeah.
good stuff.
He's got a new book out, right? What is the new one?
Did he? Yeah, it's either a new one or he revised his other ones. I can't remember.
Oh,
Um,
Atomic Habits. So good.
I'll make it convince. That's another one. Yep, that's there. I think that's there. I hope it's there. Well, it looks like we have reached a pretty solid number of 86. So even though it's 12:04, I'm gonna start chatting. So you can see that Sherry and I, we've met a couple of times, sort of this way, but I am so excited to have her here. She was actually speaking yesterday as well at the What's Next in Wellness webinar, and we're going to be touching possibly on some of those topics. And if you attended yesterday, I really encourage you to. So I hope you go back to your notes and think, oh, I wanted to sort of pull that string thread a little bit more. And Sherry is very well equipped to answer all of your awesome questions. I do want to mention that this is the first sort of West Coast webinar series that the Naturally Network is putting on. You can see here we are all on the left. We've got brand new Seattle. Welcome to the team. We've got Naturally NorCal. We just merged. It used to be Naturally North Bay and Naturally Bay Area. We are now one. Why not? It's fabulous. San Diego, welcome to the group, and LA. My gosh, you guys have been through a lot, and anybody from LA, we hope this is a reprieve from the hell that you're living in right now, and our hearts go out to you. Um, there's a lot of initiatives that industry groups are putting on, so keep an eye on what Naturally Network is doing. OSC, there are a lot of brands that really want to help out. So we're keep on hearts. It was huge what you've gone through. Okay, we've got a lot of upcoming events. On the 21st, legal updates for HR. This is going to be huge. We've got a lot happening there. We've got a pre-party as well for the UNFI show down in San Diego, Los Angeles. Despite the stuff that's happening, innovating retail series. This is fantastic. How part one is frictionless coupons. I'll definitely be tuning into that one. And finally, we've got Seattle hosting the CPG Connect at Armistice Coffee. Next up, this is really a fun. So we have rebranded from Pitch Slam to Naturally Rising. This applications are open. Go get it. And guess what? This is not the only Pitch Slam. Sherry has a Pitch Slam she's also going to share. So if you are a brand looking to get some guidance, some mentorship, and possibly some money, definitely apply. Next up, we're back. Okay. Sherry, I want to introduce, you're going to introduce yourself and the topic that we're going to be tackling today. I'm going to be moderating. I encourage everybody to throw their questions and answers in the Q&A box. I'm going to be peppering Sherry with questions. Let's make this as interactive as possible. She is ready, incredibly knowledgeable, and we're very lucky to have her. So take it away, Sherry. Oh, you're on mute. And while you're fixing your presentation, I'm going to remind everybody, if you wanted to introduce yourself in the chat, please do so. We have 107 people here at the moment, and this is very exciting. Lots of different names from different companies right across the country.
I love this. Thank you. Okay, now you would think this is my first time that I've done this. Do
So
you
excited.
see my screen, or do you see a crazy screen that shows how crazy my desktop is?
Admittedly, your desktop is there. You might want, yeah,
Oh,
if you could put it in
dang.
presentation mode.
I don't know what's going on with me today. All right, let's get
Hello, Jeff.
this.
I'll just
This
keep
is
on
what is
doing
it.
the Mr. Rogers hello.
I love it. All right. Hopefully,
Hello,
hopefully.
there we
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right, everybody. It's so awesome to be here. Thank you so much, Susie. I'm actually really excited. By the way, we've got, if you tell us if you were there yesterday, and I'm going to show you the agenda if you weren't for yesterday. And we want you to help us drive today's conversation and like where we should click and where we should, go a little bit deeper. But I would be remiss, our marketing team would say, like, Sherry, you missed the ball here. Our SMB team, which is our, really supporting all of the Naturally teams, we want to give you free data. This is super true. So please, if you haven't accessed our data, jump on, grab the data. We always have not just access to free reports, but also you get a consultation with our team. I love our advisor team. They're phenomenal. And like Susie said, and by the way, you'll get this deck. So like all the QR codes, you're going to see quite a few QR codes throughout. We love the formerly known as Pitch Slam that Naturally does. We also are really excited about our Founder Slam. So please apply for both. Like we are crazy. I was telling Susie, like at NIQ, we're absolutely nuts about the brands that apply. We support them. We've had instances at a Naturally party where we were dragging a retailer to one of the brands to say, you've got to talk to this person. You've got to talk to this brand. But there's a lot of prizes. And one of the coolest things we do is a lot of work with our Bases Innovation team to really help you kind of message test and pressure test kind of your brand overall. So please, if you have any interest, I think that it opens up in March. But please apply for both of these. We're really, excited about what we can kind of help small brands. And, I think you'll see that a lot of the conversation today in terms of how we just want to help brands in this space overall. This was, Susie, what we covered yesterday. And so, please, everybody, drop in the chat if you're like, go here, like, and Susie, you just help, if you could help, if somebody's like, hey, get to sustainability, or let's talk about DEI, right? Like wherever anyone wants to go, we want to drive. But I thought maybe what I would do is just start off and talk a little bit about just how the landscape is changing around the consumer, kind of some big picture things. I think we've all kind of felt the last few years and everything that's been occurring. And then from there, we can go wherever you all want to go. But this is kind of a menu of topics that we can touch. The kind of big four themes that we talked about yesterday is really around like how this consumer shifted. The great part is there's continued to be focus on wellness. So we've seen a bounce back on all things around wellness, better for, natural, organic, etc. So, a lot of real positive, headwinds or tailwinds we finally have. But also, here's the reality, like the consumer's more empowered than ever, but they're also really contradictory. And the truth is they're less loyal. And I will tell you, that's like, so often people say like, oh, this is a trend or this is a trend. And I would tell you, like, we have to pay more attention to loyalty as a metric and as how we understand our consumers than we ever have before. Like this is so, so critical, especially I'm going to talk a little bit about some really crazy things that we're seeing across the generations. I'm a Gen Xer. I will try not to dog on the Gen Zers. If you're a Gen, you tell me, Susie, raise your hand if you're a Gen Z, or tell me, Susie, if there's a lot
You
of
know
them.
I'm with you. You know I'm with you. Gen X all the way. We're somehow we survived. But yeah, no, the Gen Z is definitely driving the boat at this point, or navigating the waters. As it is. Yep.
The other piece I'll tell you, and this is, you're not going to love this, but I think it's a great frame of reference. And that is that because wellness and this idea of like where consumers are prioritizing themselves, their health, it's omnipresent, it's everywhere. And I'm going to talk a lot about digital and online. It means that they're less brand loyal and they're really looking for attributes, and they're looking less around products and even less around retailers. So we'll talk about like how you might want to think about that. And then we won't go as deep into this, but I do think this is an important topic. And that is this fact that we have such disparities in the country around wellness, around just being able to spend money. And it's continuing to drive, overall inequities. It's going to be a crazy year. Someone asked me actually in November. They said, what's next when wellness going to look like in 2025? And I'm like, I don't know. We have to wait for the election, right? Like, and truly, I think we've got some fascinating things that are kind of happening right now with America, Make America Healthy. Susie, one thing that we've kind of been joking about here internally is like, when was the last time any of us knew who the potential Health and Human Services Secretary was going to be, right? Like literally, like
yeah.
we're kind of just seeing a different dynamic. The Farm Bill is a big deal, right? That just got kicked up until March, but the conversations around what can and can't be, might be not covered in the future under that. And then a lot of things, of course, around traceability. So it's going to be an interesting year. You'll kind of hear, in fact, yesterday morning, right as we were getting ready, right, the red dye #3 announcement coming out. Lots of things happening too, right? I think you hear with the administration leaving, with the Surgeon General kind of throwing out the like, let's put warning labels on alcohol, et cetera. So there's also, I think we're going to see in the next week just a few more, what would you call maybe last ditch efforts.
And just the way brands communicate as well, right? On NPR this morning, and we know TikTok is going to be going away maybe on Sunday. I mean, how are brands now supposed to navigate through all of these changes and also reach our audiences, which we've agreed are probably Gen Z and late millennials? And it's going to be it's going to be a wild year. How do we deal with it? How do we get to our consumers? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and actually,
let's tell us, right?
Well, let's jump into that. So a couple things. I mean, here's some good news. Like we've been presenting, these trends, and it's been really tough for the last 2 years, right? I was like, oh, and then volumes down and units are down. Finally, I can actually tell you that things are looking positive, especially in food. The perimeter, the non-food, or the perimeter is really driving a lot of the growth. And that's kind of an interesting space because that's produce, that's deli, that's bakery, that's seafood, that's meat, and even dairy. Non-food, if you kind of take tobacco out of it, tobacco's declining, but it is a fascinating space too. It's actually not declining as much, but so that, again, there's some positive. We are seeing consumers coming back in the store. We're seeing a little bit of this cautionary behavior pullback. And same thing on Better For. So here's a really, for all of us on the call and in this space, we did see people pull back on everything around wellness, everything that was discretionary, et cetera. Really in 2022 and 2023, we have seen a flip back. And so the good part is we saw, and this is in dollars, we actually saw even more resilience when we looked at units. People are committed to this idea of, is it good for me? Is it good for you? Is it good for the planet? So we're excited to kind of see where that's going to continue to grow and evolve. I will tell you, Susie, the one thing, like, people ask about, like, what's going to go on with wellness. And I think we are at a critical juncture with wellness right now. And it's not just because of technology, because we've always had evolving technology, but it's about the immediacy and the personalization of the technology we have today. I geek out every year about when the CES show, right? It's all of what's the new technology, but the fact that we're measuring our metabolic health, right? And our biomarkers, and we've got skin robots that can look at our skin to see what personalized skincare we need and monitor our glucose or our hormones. I mean, those two on the far right are in beta mode. Even buying our over-the-counter, right? Like over-the-counter hearing aids. Here's the fascinating thing. It's not like we go to the doctor, once a year and they kind of, give us, we're in control. And I'm a big Aura Ring fan, and I laugh because I feel like we're in a cult for anybody that's on. Okay, Where it's like a cold. And the first thing you do when you see someone that's on an Oura ring, it's like, did you change your alcohol consumption? Oh my God, what do you do with your sleep, right? It's that immediacy that people have. So it's not like I ate healthy today and I hope it, I see an impact. We're going to see more of this immediate element of like, oh, my behavior is actually, playing back to me.
Yeah, and I feel like things like the or like reducing alcohol. What I find is interesting is as we're becoming more in control of our health, it's going to impact the store. I
Yes.
guess this is where you're going, right? Where alcohol sales might be declining, where fruits and vegetables, the perimeter, it's going back up, and people are seeing how it impacts their glucose, their sleep and performance. I think it's fascinating.
I do too. I mean, I'm excited
Wellness
for the
model, not a sick model. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I will say the one piece, and again, you'll kind of hear me a few times throughout this today, is unfortunately this exacerbates our inequities, right? Like this is, it makes health and wealth very tied together. Even the GLP-1s, and if you all want me to, talk about GLP-1s, that's another example right now where it's kind of a health and wealth, again increasing that disparities. But we could talk about what we're seeing there. AI, the only thing I just want to throw out here, and I'm going to fly through some of these slides quickly, but there's a couple things and I know we've got some folks that are on the creative side here and people that are kind of thinking about their marketing and maybe using AI. I just want to highly recommend, first of all, this article, which our team put up. But if you are using AI for any of your marketing, I would recommend this Dove playbook because there's a lot of challenges with when you're using AI that it can, I mean, women can be over sexualized, right? You don't have the kind of like equity in terms of the images, et cetera. So again, if you're in that space and you're using it, I'd recommend looking for some of these great like best practices that some of the larger brands are sharing out with the industry overall. So Susie, you mentioned this. Okay, so this is like, you talk about like step change. So the pandemic was huge, right? Because we saw people that had never shopped online, all of a sudden were like, I don't want to go in a store. I don't want to, I want to, have everything delivered, or I'm willing to at least go up to and have, pick up my groceries, etc. And that's kind of continued. It grew really quickly in 2020, 2021. It kind of slowed a little bit. And now we're back a bit more with that, seeing some really strong growth. The categories where you see the biggest kind of share online are the ones you'd expect: baby care, health and beauty, pet, right? Some of these things too, where you're like, I don't, necessarily want to carry the bag of dog food. So it's great to have that delivered. Vitamins and supplements is a fascinating one because when you think about some of these categories, they've shape shifted. 60% of those are sold online today. So it's not even about going in the store. And I think, I talk to a lot of retailers, and, one of the challenges for many retailers is they're curating things for consumers, and then the consumer buys it once from them and then goes online to, buy the rest of the products. And so the challenge for those retailers is how do you always stay ahead of the innovation and your curation, and how do you keep them buying in your store? And again,
Right.
I think
Creating that loyalty, right? And you touched on that initially. How do you create that loyalty? And if you are able to do a subscribe and save as an e-commerce brand, that's where you want your money. It's a lot cheaper to do it online than it would be in a store. So
yep, exactly. And
interesting that bridge.
that direct to consumer here in the middle, perfect illustration. Now there's been a lot of fluctuation you can kind of see over the last couple of years. And part of it's been shifts in the social media and the difficulty to, customer acquisition. Many of the brands on this call are probably like, yeah, we lived that, right? And then the other piece is obviously, when we have funding and, brands that were, losing their ability. So like kind of just equity in the market. But a lot of health and beauty, or not just health and beauty, but health and wellness is sold direct to the consumer. And so if you are in that space, I just think you have a gold mine of data, your own data. So to be mining that and interacting with your consumers. And, we're actually seeing so many of the larger brands now that are looking what small brands are doing and saying like, hey, we should be interacting differently and co-creating with our consumers, right? Letting them help us figure out our flavors, et cetera. So if you're doing it today, I just can't recommend it enough. And then this idea, right, of social selling. So
Oh my
TikTok,
gosh, right? Yeah.
holy right. And so who knows, right? So, I mean, it sounds like Elon's going to buy it. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen with TikTok, right? Or Sunday is going to be an interesting day. But the truth is, it's changed the marketing funnel, right? It's not days, it's like seconds. I mean, I think about how many times I say, like, oh, I was Instagram influenced on this or Insta influenced on that, right? Now, there's some challenges that I'll chat through with you, but I would say also the thing for the brands that are on the call, and you probably are already doing this, live streaming, social selling. Like, I think this is the hot new area for you to be thinking about. And it's, it's like QVC on steroids, but very, very
Yes.
personalized, right? Where it's not like just an hour, you might be on for a whole afternoon. We're just hearing phenomenal things from brands who are like, I sold out of my inventory, right? Like, I'm creating these kind of LTO ideas in this very like unique environment, I guess, right? Like, it's kind of like you come and you're there. I don't know, Susie, have you
Yeah.
seen that?
I definitely have an affiliate marketing too. So not even the brand doing it, but an influencer or an affiliate. And I don't know whether everybody's actually played around with this. I'm head of marketing at Big Tree, and we've been really looking into this as a means of um, we don't you don't pay somebody to be your creator, right? They're getting a piece of the action of every dollar they that they sell, and I find like that to be super
Yeah.
interesting around
Yes.
the customer acquisition, and also the influence of the influencer. Oh my gosh, I mean, like you say, QVC on steroids. I mean, no longer do we have like the Elizabeth Taylor look-alike with the big the gems. You don't know who this person is, but back in the day you were willing to sit with that person for 2 hours at a time. Here we are on steroids. Within seconds you are taken from the top of that funnel to, all right, I am converted and an evangelist. It's amazing.
It's,
Yeah.
by the way, we just dated ourselves with our QVC. Like, some people
We
are
did.
probably on this call going like, I have no idea what they're even talking about. QVC. Um,
Oh, there's a question here actually while we go back, because
oh,
actually
love
it
it.
might even play into this. And so Sarah is asking a question around the functional beverage space. And we have seen a lot of this, right? Non-alcoholic options with ingredients like adaptogens, nootropics. And certainly I've worked with traditional medicinals tea, and there's a lot of adaptogenic innovation happening over there. I personally am a huge fan of many of them. So what's happening in that space
Mm.
that you see?
I love that. Okay, let me take you there. Although before I take you there, let me tell you just one thing to consider,
Yeah.
that I think
Yes.
is really important as we'll just kind of close out this online conversation. And that is, and again, you'll see slides um, that are in the deck that we send out that are we won't cover. One thing to keep in mind, right, is that loyalty is more fragmented than ever because of this online element. And this is like on the left, this visual is just the top nutrition brands, right? Like sports nutrition brands on TikTok. Like, look at their sales. So, like, again, this is an important element as you're thinking about your business, you're thinking about your planning, etc. And we all know, right, private labels growing, and it, like,
Yeah.
wealthier people, younger people, everybody says they care. I do want to say something, Susie, about the influencers, just because I think you brought up a really important point. Um, and then we'll go into the functional beverages and the health and need states. So there is I had actually like 20 slides on this, and I pulled it down to one slide, but trust is really a fascinating conversation right now. And I think even you look at our election, right? Like, you have something where you had half the country believing, facts in one way, and half the country believing facts, another way. And like, we don't even like seem to have the ability to kind of have like trust in things that are you would consider basic. Then at the same time, there's a lot of, we've got more food recalls and product recalls and white papers being, or scientific papers being pulled back, and even online, you write the fake reviews. We were
Right.
really blown away. Look at this level of distrust. People don't trust doctors, they don't trust the pharmaceuticals, they don't trust the healthcare industry. And you mentioned influencers, and I just wanted to kind of say that, like, I think there's another dynamic that's happening right now. So for brands that are using influencers, I mean, there's a real interesting conversation around influencers moving into de-influencers, moving into wellness grifters, right? And so, like, really watching the influencers that you are using for any level of affiliate marketing or whatever, because there's actually kind of a contingent of people that are kind of coming out and saying, like, wrong, right? Like, so a lot of kind of fascinating things there. Um, I also just want to make sure to call out, if anybody is not kind of watching what's happening with Sunrise 2027, this is a really cool opportunity when you think about the future. This is where we're going to be transitioning from UPCs, right, barcodes, to 2D barcodes. And it's not just about like the ability to have more traceability on your product or where it was sourced from. That's for sure, right? Better nutrition, information, deeper dives, whatever. The QR codes are going to give you the coolest opportunities to actually market to people after they've bought the product, right? To have marketing activations with your consumers. So like I can't even recommend enough. There's information here, GS1, their Sunrise, the Sunrise Project. I can't recommend enough for you small brands to, if you can, try and be on the forefront of this, because the transparency element, the trust element, but also just this like, how do you get and hold your customers, your consumers so close? There's going to be a lot of innovation around tech that's going to do that.
That is cool.
All right, I'm going to jump ahead because I loved this question on the functional beverages. So let me orient you to this. And if anybody was on yesterday, like I always say, like there's always one slide that I'm like, oh my God, I love this slide. Well, I love this slide. Like this is my favorite. Nobody's ever seen this before yesterday. So if you weren't on yesterday, this is the first time it's been in the market. But we took a look across the whole store, because again, this idea of like, it's really about what are my health priorities, right? What are my need state priorities, more so even than like what category am I in? We took a look across the store of everything that was a health and need state, and we identified where and so across the bottom, this is where it's penetrated, meaning like the number of consumers that are actually buying something in that area. And then that vertical axis is the number of categories where that claim is showing up. And the size of the bubble, this is what I love about this chart. The size of the bubble is the size of actually the growth. Like what were the net dollar growth? So digestive health, like, sometimes people are like, oh, Sherry, it's just,
Microbiome.
yeah. And they're like, oh, it's just poppy. And I'm like, actually, it's not. This is in over 250 categories across the store. So like digestive health is not just a functional beverage claim. Couple other things is you're just kind of looking at this, and then I'm actually going to show you functional beverages, brain health, inflammation, metabolism, seeing more and more around cell function, so that there's so much happening around kind of biohacking. So there's kind of these emerging topics. Estrogen support, I mean, again, we are just seeing really cool, there's still a lot of upside, but really cool innovation around supporting women along their entire lifespan and reproductive journey. And then mood and stress. So functional beverages, we're always, this is the total store. And then on the right, what we did is we took a look at, like, we always look at functional beverages and vitamins and supplements. Those are kind of the two areas where we feel like consumers tell us pretty quickly, like this is where they're looking for the next thing. And so you can see again, within functional beverages, where some of those things are really actually also playing out, and within, which categories. And same thing with VMS. You can see, of course, we have, hydration, immunity. By the way, I'll tell you what, like we have been fascinated to watch immunity, right? It really spiked during the pandemic, and it just continues to be something that we are seeing consumers that are very, very interested in. Take me back to the question, Susie. What was the specific question?
It was about nootropics, and it was about functional beverages and non-alcohol, or I guess replacing alcohol with non-alcoholic beverages.
I don't know who asked that question, but I just want to say, here you go. Let's chat about this. So here's what we're seeing. I mean, and we're kind of putting it under this bigger umbrella around alternatives and blurring of lines. This is, and this is on women, and a lot of the stats that I have in here on the consumer research, we just put in around women, because women, I'm sorry, men that are on the call, but women often tend to be the early adopters in terms of kind of like looking for the new and kind of what can we do different. And look at the number of people that are saying, I'm looking for alternative, I'm looking for homeopathy. I again, nootropics, right? We're seeing growth across the store, nootropics, adaptogens, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, sorts of ingredients and products, ancient grains, right? So it's like what's old is new again. And we do see great growth in non-alc. And I want to, though, really highlight that actually in our data, it's not just people that are saying like, I'm completely quitting. It really is like a lot of this where we're seeing this sober curious element. And in fact, 93% of the people, like they're buying both. It's just more of, hey, this might be something that I alternate, right? So it's not necessarily, completely cold turkey, although there is, there's an element of that, and cannabis. So,
Mm.
we, continue to see, and I will say, it's not just cannabis, for swapping out for alcohol, cannabis for sleep, cannabis for anxiety, cannabis for pain.
Interesting.
We have a really cool partner where they've done a lot of great work, actually looking at consumers and like pain medications. And I think this is going to continue to be an area that we will see growth. And one of the things is, it's not our data, but they had shared with us that some of the fastest growth in cannabis usage is our boomers, right? Our parents who, were never let any of us smoke weed, and we're like, keep your kids off drugs, are actually some of the biggest, growth of cannabis. And obviously the legalization around states is having an impact as well.
Availability, yeah, it's no longer vilified. I mean, it's all obvious, yeah, it's finally accepted. And what I find, you mentioned something very interesting around all that is old is new again. And I wonder whether that actually goes back to trust and looking at, hey, this has been going on for, a millennium of period of time, like Ayurvedic, right? Like, let's
Yeah.
go back to what the ancients are saying because it seemed to make sense. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. There is a question that I'm going to actually dovetail into this, and this is around new launches. And when we can even use non-alc as an example. But the question is, do you feel the loyalty is partially due to new launches being too skewed to personal tastes? We see a lot of launches that don't make it because they don't have resources to really fine tune their product. And I mean, I'm interpreting this as sort of like a navel gazing, like, oh, I love
Yeah.
this. I think the market will use it, and not realizing that maybe some consumer testing is warranted, or at least testing the investment industry to see whether they have an appetite for supporting a particular product, or maybe not doing using the data, Sherry. I mean, small plug here for Visor. Big Tree Farms is a user of NIQ Visor. It is phenomenal. I encourage everybody to go to that link because it's that sort of data that helps with new launches. Where's the white space? I was actually looking at opportunity gaps this morning around our products, and it shows where the white space is. It shows where, like, this is where the industry is going. And if you navel gaze and come up with a product that is completely off base, you're not going to get there if it doesn't meet all of the different attributes that are growing. Is that Did I nail it a little bit or close?
I love it. I love it. Actually, I'm going to take you to two slides that I think will,
All right,
that's
cool.
it's a really cool question. So for sure. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of, actually going to take you to some of our basics work of like, what are the best winning innovations
Brilliant.
this year? Yes, oftentimes there are products that are way too niche. The consumer's too niche. It's not kind of meeting a macro theme. And I would say, and that's why, again, like this is a perfect example, right? That microbiome, those bigger, like the bigger need states, and then how they play out specifically within your category, your brand. But yeah, often there's unfortunately a lot that is like, I just think there's an audience for this, but like also not fully testing that. So the microbiome, like, this one, it fascinates me because it's not just like our gut health. I mean, we do know that consumers are seeing this like gut, brain, gut, skin. We've seen a lot of fascinating things around our oral microbiome and the impact it has on
Right.
our brain, but it's also feminine care and cleaning products and our pet products. So it's like, here's a concept that consumers are getting right around the microbiome and prebiotics and probiotics and postbiotics, but it can play out in kind of different iterations across the store. Same thing, electrolytes, right? Like I mean, who knew we were so dehydrated? So because it's just like gone crazy, and it's in categories you kind of even wouldn't have expected, because consumers are kind of like getting that theme, right? Getting that like, oh yes, I get this, I need this.
Keep hearing it.
Mel
They keep hearing it. Yeah.
yeah, melatonin's a great another one, right? Where it's like there's a little bit of like, oh, I don't know if I want to take it because of the impact it might have on hormones, but we're seeing it grow in beauty products, right? So it's like, I even though it's something I don't want to like maybe ingest, like I understand why it's good for me. Things like collagen banking, etc. Biohacking. I want to take you to this slide, Susie, though, to kind of illustrate this, I think even more. This is probably going to scare everybody as they're watching me scroll through this and think like, holy cow, she really had a lot to talk to us about today. Um, So every year, our Bases team, they're the folks that do
Oh,
the
this is great.
innovation. And by the way, this is why I really want you to all apply for that pitch slam. The Bases team will take you through a whole innovation analysis of your product. But every year they look at like who are the breakthrough innovations, like what drove the breakthroughs, like, and they kind of isolate, like, is it, and wellness always, by the way, wellness attributes, sustainability attributes, like, always kind of like comes to the top. These are the ones they just released this in October or November. In the deck that we're going to send out, there's actually a link. You can go watch they're so much smarter than I am, our Bases team. You can go watch them as they can kind of take you through this. But here's what they found. And this is the piece I think all of you would really, kind of be
Oh, this is good.
take it. One of the big things is flipping the nutritionals. I mean, some people, it's not even like a new product. It's really like, how do we improve the health of what's already out there? And, we've seen that, right? I mean, I think that, again, the functional beverage space is a perfect example of that. There's been interesting things around technology. The Pretty Cat litter is a really good example of that. Influencers, we're seeing more of that in our breakthrough winners in terms of like having, but it is the right personality, right? I mean, we have also seen, influencers kind of crash and
The
burn
other way.
as well.
Yeah.
And then distribution, we're really seeing some interesting kind of shifts in terms of how folks are going to market, and not kind of the constant race to get as many doors as possible, but really building up, different things around loyalty base, around different distribution relationships with retailers. So that, like I said, that link is there. I can't even recommend it enough. They will take you through specific examples of what these brands did, and some great opportunities, I think, to kind of learn from. But yeah, I think there definitely are. You'll even see that there's so many good best practices to kind of like gut check your products and your innovation against.
Oh, that is fantastic. So here's a question around like European nutritionals versus American nutritionals. Do you think that one of the reasons why it's almost like we're trying to get healthier as a nation, looking at maybe Europe as the benchmark? Like I remember seeing something on Instagram, on the gram, of ketchup, and it was Heinz ketchup, and it was, a very clean ingredient list in the UK, and it had I mean, the color, it was not like a perfect red, it was kind of a brownish thing. And then our Heinz ketchup, which had an ingredient list of that long, right? Is that sort of gathering some steam, like red dye number 4? Like where's it coming from?
Yeah, I mean, if you, gosh, it was probably October, maybe, there was kind of the roundtable on health, and, there were many influencers across kind of the fitness and
Yeah.
wellness space. And there were a lot of, and I actually found that very fascinating, because we're always doing work in the wellness space. It was the first time that I saw it through social media, the clips, right? The two, this is the US product versus the product overseas. And, we carry this, and that kind of created this groundswell, right? There was consumed about 1,000 consumers that marched on Kellogg's and said, like you said, you were going to change this 10 years ago, you didn't. Now, I will also say, in fact, I'm just going to show you this slide because there is an emerging conversation around obviously the food additives, the seed oil, etc. But
Oh, seed oil, yes.
if we really, and I've got some data on all that, I can kind of share with you where we are on the additives and the seed oils, but I think we have to be really honest with ourselves too. You know what I mean? Like we are, as a society, we love a villain, right? It's always like, oh, right. It's by the
It's
way,
true.
not the fact that 1 out of 10 of us isn't even meeting our fruit and vegetable intake, daily. Like, not that. That's not the problem. It's, all these other things. So we're kind of trying to like figure it all out.
Right.
And so I kind of say that because there is this kind of right now on food additives, there is definitely this kind of look, like, oh, what is that what they're doing? Is that what's better? Nicotine is another one, like I said earlier, that's kind
Yeah.
of like shifting. Like we've been seeing smoking going down, but now there's this, growth of the smokeless, nicotine
Right.
packs.
Right.
So there's a lot of kind of shifting factors, and it's not necessarily just looking at Europe. I think where our CPG space is looking at Europe more is around sustainability. Not the
Sure.
consumer as much as like the brands who are saying like, okay, this EU Green Directive, right, which is going to require more like you can't put anything on unless you can validate and certify it. I think that's probably more where we're seeing even more of a kind of a CPG look across the pond.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. And actually, there's a question around vilifying an ingredient, and that's around caffeine. And the question is around trends around caffeine and in energy more broadly. What do you think? What do you think?
Oh, so energy is growing. Energy is an interesting one. We all want more energy.
Right.
We're seeing that for
Oh, yeah.
sure. Caffeine, I will put it in this deck before we send it out. It's complicated. I mean, it is like the data is showing both, right? We're seeing growth
Right.
of, like people, and we also search. So we search everything that's claimed on a package, in terms of the ingredients or the nutrition label, any claims that are made. And we've seen, but we also, track what people search. We're seeing growth in people looking for no caffeine and low caffeine, and we're searching for people looking for high caffeine. So, like we really have both things happening. The biggest shift that we've seen is that there were a variety of like categories that tried to put caffeine in products that consumers weren't as interested in having the caffeine in that form. So I think it's a bigger, when I say form too, I think there's two forms,
Delivery
right?
vehicle.
Delivery, exactly. And also
Yeah.
like, I mean, and I think I might have, let's see if it's on this slide. Um, we do look at ingredients, and I might, yeah, you can see like guarana, you know what I mean
Oh,
here.
this looks
Um,
great.
I
Yeah.
know if data nerds unite, like for those of you that are love data, you're probably, geeking out like I do on this slide. But this is that, you can see like some of the ingredients where we're seeing across the bottom. I'll just kind of orient you. Across the bottom is like, these are the number of categories where that ingredient is showing up. And then the vertical axis on this one is what's the growth been, a CAGR over 4 years. And then the size of the bubble on this one is actually just the size of the sales. It's not the growth. So it really is, something like you can see collagen over there on the far
Mm,
right. You can see
mhm.
emerging ones in the upper left, like colostrum. So this is just a few that we thought would be most interesting that tie with a lot of the themes that are in the rest of the presentation. But kind of natural, sources of caffeine, something that we're seeing kind of grow. I mean, not that they're all
Yeah.
not natural, but
Well, let's leave it here just a sec because Sarah has another question here, and I feel it's a brilliant one. Especially, I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, so this question really resonates with me, and that is um, educating consumers about a certain functional ingredient without violating the rules and regulations around advertising. Obviously, you can't make false claims. And unless it's a functional, well, yeah, you can't make false claims. Period. So how do we navigate those waters
man, that's a great
and
question.
build
I mean,
credibility and trust?
right. I mean, we're watching it right now with the FDA starting to send letters to people that are making claims around the GLP-1s, right? Like it's like that's the latest version of claims. Um, I don't know, Susie. So the question is like, how do we navigate this when we can't? Yeah, it's very, very
It's
difficult, right?
building trust. Yeah, like building trust around efficacy of a particular product without saying that it actually says what it does. And I do feel like third party testing is really important. Third party validation. I think, and again, this is me coming from a natural food industry, but also with this background in pharma, and it's making sure the ingredient list is as clean as possible. But when you're introducing something new, like I think colostrum's a really interesting one, right? I mean, we all know that's the first thing that comes out of breast milk, and you're giving it to a newborn baby. How do you how do you communicate the benefits of colostrum and make it resonate with an adult without getting a little gross, right? Like it's sort
Yeah.
of it's all
Oh
about
yeah.
efficacy, and efficacy is it's usually proven by science. But yeah,
Well,
that's
all
a tough
right.
one, Sarah.
I got two, so I got a couple thoughts for you. I mean, one, by the way, I'm not sure colostrum is going to be. I apologize if anybody is doing colostrum, but I'm not sure it's going to be on the list next year in terms of because now we're already starting to see like, wait, is this ethical or like what you say like
Yeah,
kind of an interesting backlash already. So that's a to watch, right? Is this that be a whiplash?
sure.
I would say the other piece, Susie, you said something I think is so important, right? Like scientific studies, right? Like the like referencing those, the research. I will say though, like I loved the programming at Supply Side this year, but one of these sessions that I sat in that just blew my mind was the one around all of these scientific studies that are being recalled and these AI paper mills
Yeah.
that are so
Yeah.
like I would also say like if you are using research, right? And if it feels too good to be true, like just know
It might
that
be.
it might be. I mean, I think I was blown away with how prevalent the problem is on some of the research. So just making sure maybe there's multiple sources of
It's biases, 100% biases, and the quality of the research is so critical. Is and some of the, just side thing, but looking at how many people were included in the study is always a great litmus test. If there are 5, it's not good. If there
yeah,
are 25, still not good. 250, probably not so good. You got to get
yeah,
into the thousands, and obviously look where it comes from and all of that. But I think this
yeah,
is really an interesting slide. I love it. Um, all right, keep these questions coming. We
yeah, please.
typically, I mean, I think we're supposed to be wrapping up fairly soon, but I do feel like there's a lot more out there. So throw them into the questions and answers.
So can I throw one out that
Please do.
I just think we sponsor for Naturally. We sponsor the minority owned, the Trailblazer program, and we're really passionate about that. I think we're in a really interesting time right now as we are watching so many major companies pull away from DEI. Really with kind of Costco is what from what I'm seeing, the only one that's kind of, holding strong. We did a CMO study and we were, asking like, where does this fall? Where is it from a priority standpoint? Um, I I would say for those of you, whether you're a minority owned brand, I actually really think this isn't a time to lean in to this. We're seeing really beautiful things in terms of, like Advil, right? And Believe My Pain. I think, we're in this like right here and we, we'll move back. But the one big thing I would say to you is that we did research 2 years ago, and well, three now, but we were looking at, like across the country, right? Like how diverse is the US? And then we looked at the major CPGs, and then we looked at the fastest growing small brands. And then we looked at like VMS. Like we tried to just like, we kind of aggregated a bunch of groups. Nobody looked like the US in terms of diversity, in terms of their consumer base. That across all three of the analyses we did, the brands that looked the closest, meaning more diverse in their consumer base, were growing faster than the ones that were not. So when we think about,
That's interesting.
yeah, like I mean, there is a business case for this. There is a human case for this. I think,
Mm.
like where we all want to end up on the side of this in history. This is an important time. And I think small brands, like there's a lot more opportunity, brands to really show their values in sustainability and in kind of things around equity.
I love that, and it's not just um, like this Advil ad is particularly interesting because I mean, back to the science. There was some scientific. There's science is unfortunately a lot of the studies were done or tests were done on white males, right? And so women were left out. The Black community was left out. Hispanic community was left out. Even children were left out. Like
Yeah.
it's and when you have Advil, for example, when the dosing is based on a white 175-pound white male, you're going to have some very different outcomes if you don't fall into that category. So that sort of in and of itself is, I feel, a really great illustration of just communities, like the entire swath being left out. It's amazing. And when we also think about marketing, right? How do we market to certain constituencies within this tapestry that we call the US, right? And if you don't
Yeah.
have people on your team that get it, you're not going to tap in. And it might be the
Oh,
product doesn't make sense, or even if the product does, your delivery doesn't. So anyway,
yeah.
this is a really great slide. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny you say that because when we did the research, my biggest fear when we released it was that people would say, "Oh, we just have to figure out how to market to diverse people." And it's like, no, you have to have the diversity of thought in your
In
organization to, you know what I mean? So thank you for actually, highlighting what was, our fear when we released that.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Well, there are a couple more questions here. Anything on protein and fiber? I'm guessing this is around, there we go. Product attributes. Is it product attribute? I guess a product,
Yep.
yeah, ingredients.
Yes. Yes. Let's talk about protein and
Protein has
fiber.
really had an interesting ride, isn't it?
Oh
And it
my goodness.
continues.
It does. So I'll tell you, the last few years, we continue to see the biggest growth in over 25 grams of protein per serving. So like even like the amount of protein. In fact, we've had some people who said, "Hey, can you start breaking it up? 35 grams." Like we actually want to look at the break above that. Protein is really interesting piece. I will say, one of the things, we have a partner Spate, and we looked at, they go listen to social listening, and so we were saying, like, let's go, what's going on with this protein conversation. One thing that was fascinating, right? Like everybody knows that, like we all know protein, right? Older people are doing it for like muscle. We know it's a big part of the GLP-1s. We were intrigued to see that a big part of the conversation around protein is actually women and hormonal health and PCOS. And so they're like the many nuances of protein are really, really fascinating. Did you ask me about fiber? Was that the other one you
Fiber
said?
too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I
It's
think
having a moment too, certainly around menopause and like you said, the older folks. The
and I
experts.
so I cut a few slides on fiber out of this. Is the only one that we ended up putting in it, but we expect more content from us on fiber because we think fiber is going to be the new kind of the new thing that everyone's interested in. And one of the elements is there's research, right, that it actually kind of helps our natural GLP-1, right? So like if you're not on a GLP-1, but also if you are on a GLP-1, you asked for something else though, fiber, protein,
It was
and
protein and fiber, and then when well, certainly fiber is around microbiome as well. So I think when we think about these ingredients, the ingredient levels, also consider the attribute that it's solving for, really, right? When brain health,
yeah.
microbiome. The other question here is around sustainability, right? And I feel like this might actually go back to loyalty as well. And I'm certainly curious about that, how sustainability and loyalty intertwine. I added that last bit. Sorry, Carrie. But the consumers are increasingly expecting brands to prioritize and invest in it, yet have historically not wanted to pay more for it. Any changes in that recently, or tips on how brands can convey their sustainability efforts in a way that increases sales? Thank you for asking that
Yes.
question, Carrie.
Oh, Carrie, I love that question.
I do
So I,
too.
I want to give you like a lay of the land first of just kind of like what does it look like over the last few years? And this is the solid line is those trends on the total store growth. And so as you all know, right, we saw when we were all at home 2020, 2021, where the growth went up. And then 2022 and 23, when we saw the highest inflation, the growth declined. You can see the big bubble, environmental sustainability, which is the largest. And then animal welfare is the yellow bubble, social responsibility is the smaller. Those they were trending above, then they've kind of switched, right? And then we saw some bigger declines. The most positive thing I can tell you is that again, we're starting to see this uptick. Here's a couple thoughts, kind of things to take away. One, you kind of think about, we've seen so much about the consumer says they expect the government to play the role, right? The government to do things. And so there might be, and in fact, when you get this deck, you'll see there's an actual video of one of my colleagues who's done a lot of research specifically in the Greek consumer and who they are and how do you talk to them and how they've changed over time. In fact, I'll give you the visual. And one of the things that we dug into was, well, what if you don't think the government's going to do it? Then as a consumer, like now I got to do more, right? So there might be an interesting dynamic where we might see things with the new administration, rolling back things around the Inflation Reduction Act, right? That might actually spur many of these consumers to say, like, well, then I got to do, more. I got to, do more of my part. Your question on how do we talk about this? So a couple things I would just say that might be some best practices or just some thoughts for your category. One, we've started to realize that we are breaking out environmental sustainability into nature versus climate. And we're doing that. And so you can see it here in the light purple versus the dark purple. And these are not all of our attributes. This is just a few that we wanted to kind of illustrate some of the kind of relationship. people get nature, like, right, that makes more sense to them. And so like the climate, it's a little abstract, right? So they're, you know what I mean, like, so there's kind of just a little bit of a loyalty element that plays there. We also, if you're thinking about what attributes are on your products, again, animal welfare, continues to be kind of a big area, but we are seeing kind of shifts here. So things like upcycled, like regenerative. In fact, like there's been a fascinating thing on regenerative for any of you that are in that
Yeah.
space, where we've had a lot of big brands we support farmers who support, farm regeneratively on categories that were declining, which is actually like kind of took the concept down. They putting in the romance copy. So which is why we've actually started to break out the certification versus the actual just like talking about it. The piece that the two that I clicked in specifically on in this deck that you'll see when we send it out is waste and biodiversity. Here's what we're seeing. And I for those of you that are on this, I don't want you to look at this and think like, oh, well, we should stop doing the ones on the left. But we've been looking at which ones where we're seeing declines in terms of the number of categories that are making the claim and where are we seeing growth. We don't know all the whys behind this, but I think there's a couple things as you kind of look at this. There's some new concepts that we're seeing that people are really getting behind, like upcycled, right around the waste or regenerative. The other is, there's been a shift from ambiguous claims, like what does that even mean, right? To more like measurable, impactful, in some cases, certifications.
Validated almost. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, we did a research, and we can share this out with the whole Naturally Network, but we did research a couple of years ago with McKinsey where we looked across the whole store and we were like, what's the business case? How should you think about it? Here are two like big things that I would say that we found. So one, I'm going to go back to this chart just to use this as an example. We found that brands, if they had claims in multiple categories, meaning like, when I say categories, I should say pillars, in that upper right hand corner, if they were, had an environmental claim and a social responsibility claim, they did 2 times as well. So it's not necessary about like you have to go deep in environmental, or you know what I mean, but it's really about like illustrating to that consumer who you are. That blew us away. And by the way, most brands don't. So like there's a huge, opportunity to kind of play across those pillars. Yeah, that was the big one.
That's an aha for sure.
Yeah.
We have 2 minutes left. We could talk for another half hour. And honestly, naturally, members, if you would like us back, the Sherry and Susie show, we'll gladly do it. Maybe we should start a podcast. Who knows?
I love it.
But I do want to say that these slides will be sent out. I don't know how many Sherry's planning on sending out, but if you have additional questions, and there are a couple of questions in the Q&A, we will answer them after this written because they are fantastic. Another thing, I just want to say, if you're not part of the Naturally Network, please come and join us, because a lot of these amazing sessions are not necessarily for everybody, or you have to pay. So become a member. You don't have to pay if you're a member all the time. And it's great. We have wonderful parties as well. And I mean, our whole point in the Naturally Network is building the ecosystem. We've got brands, we've got experts like Sherry, we've got service providers, and we're all interested in making conscious or consciously conscious business practices and conscious products. We want to bring them to life and really raise the bar. So come and join us and have some fun. And Sherry, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Susie.
I can't wait.
This was awesome. This was fun. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.